Only 5 things actually matter when it comes to abs, and contrary to popular belief, these things are not complicated. The steps that lay the foundation are actually pretty simple. And no, there's going to be no ab circuits here because they absolutely suck. The lower or the upper abs, be able to emphasize a certain region, but it's very minimal, right? Lower abs? Really, Fletcher? I made an oath when I first started this channel that if I had misled people in some sort of way, I would come back, I'd double track, and I'd go, hey, I made a mistake there. And I said something dumb. I knew I had to recreate a video I'd done before because you cannot target different portions of the abs. There's no upper and lower abs. Visually, yeah, of course. We'd have to be stupid to believe there's not. But it's similar to an inner chest. There's no way we can actually bias something like that. And so I knew I had to make something better for you. So here's a quick actionable step. Whip out your phone, go onto Strong, open the day where you train abs, and hit edit. We're going to be making some changes. So the first thing, obviously, when it comes to abs is a calorie deficit. And now, a calorie deficit, of course, isn't the only thing that matters. Back when I did my first cut, it was so disastrous, it was so horrible, and I ended up getting to a place where I didn't even have abs. I should have had abs if I was doing it properly, but it wasn't great. You have to avoid a couple pitfalls. The main pitfall is not training, and the other pitfall is not having enough of important nutrients, which we'll actually cover later. But currently I'm cutting again, and things haven't been going the way I'd liked. See, the main reason for this is because I'm sick, and it's I can't really do too much about that, but I've essentially been eating at maintenance for a couple of weeks, or maybe a little bit over, I'm not sure, during this period of being sick. And unfortunately, that means I've gained a little bit of weight. I haven't really gone to the gym as much as I'd like, but the idea here is we're not trying to prolong that cut through being sick. I mean, one, we're being sick and we need nutrients to fight it, but two, we don't want to risk atrophy during a point where we're not really exercising as much as we should. You may have this belief that when we're cutting down, we don't actually have to hit the abs. Of course we do. This is another thing I'll bring up later, but anyone who believes this is really just wrong. Plain and simple. Regarding the whole cutting stuff though, if you don't want to make the same mistakes I did and you want to have a cut that goes really, really well, I'd hugely recommend you go into the top left or top right, I'm not too sure. If you go right there, there'll be my video on aggressive cutting, how to properly plan it and make sure that you're doing everything properly. So quick actionable step, if you're ready for a cut, go watch that video. The next step 2, is actually going to be that protein, fat, along with the micronutrients are extremely important to getting abs. Now, I used to really focus on one thing, and that was getting in the protein. I didn't care at all about micronutrients. And so how this would typically work is I'd just slam protein shakes, I'd look at food, I'd read the protein number, and that's what I cared about. This is a very, very tunnel-minded belief. For some reason in the fitness industry, we've gone to a point where, for who knows why, protein has become something which is on a pedestal. And here's the thing, when it comes to building muscle, we use more water than we do protein. And you never hear really someone going around and being like, oh yeah, drink tons of water, man, that's going to make you get really great muscle growth. And so the protein needs being awfully low compared to what a lot of people believe you need, why would protein ever be our number one focus? Of course we have to meet it. Of course we have to meet, water needs or calorie needs, but it doesn't end there. We have to be looking into our diet holistically and going, are we getting enough fat? Are we getting enough carbs? Are we getting enough of these random vitamins and minerals that our body needs to thrive? Because if we're not, how are we ever going to achieve the physique we desire? Recently, I've actually had a bit of a difficult moment, and I've been trying to get in my vitamin C in my cut, and I've been doing this by oranges, these huge oranges, and I love oranges, so it's not really a pain point for me. But these oranges cost 50p per orange. That is an absurd amount for an orange. And so it got to a point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. And I literally just bought one of those vitamin C supplements. And I wouldn't recommend supplementing everything, but I think there are moments where you can look at a trade-off and go, what's the cheapest way for me to get this micronutrient? Especially if you're doing something like cutting and maybe on a budget, then it's like, yeah, maybe I should get the vitamin C supplement or the vitamin D supplement or the magnesium supplement or the zinc supplement, which are all things that I recommend. I typically didn't recommend vitamin C, might change my stance on it, but I think it's a budget thing. You can very easily get it in your diet if you have the money. You guys might even go Fletcher, micronutrients doesn't matter much. Dude, are you for real? If our body needs things that it can't make itself to survive, how on earth could you tell me that we don't need it? What happens if you don't get enough vitamin C? The pirate curse, scurvy. And you're telling me that all these other ones you don't have to worry about, that you don't have to track, you don't have to get? No. Let's not even merit that line of reasoning a single second. So you have to start tracking. It's a quick actionable step. Install the app Cronometer, and then look at your weekly report, which will show you an average of what you're eating. And it will tell you what you're missing out on. By the way, you will have to, of course, import your actual food into this, but you'll start to know the sort of things you're missing out on, or the sort of things that you're having too much of. And then we can very easily make sure that we're getting everything we need and not too much of it. Step 3 is going to be the fact that a majority of your abs are going to be built with compounds. When I first started in the gym, I was doing a ton of junk volume. This is something I'm not going to mention again. I've mentioned it way too many times. I'm sure I'll mention it again in the future, but today I'm not going to go into the whole deep dive of how much volume you need to do. The main thing here was I was picking a lot of exercises that were heavy compounds, very high stability, and I was struggling, man. My core was under such a high demand that I would get the most intense lower back pain. My spinal erectors became the best part of my back because when I was doing these deadlifts and I was doing these barbell rows and everything else under the sun, when I was doing all these things which had zero stability, I was not growing my traps, I was not growing my lats. I was just growing my spinal erectors. And they're still actually a strength for me. But here's the thing, the spinal erectors are part of the core. When you're getting big spinal erectors, we can reason that the rest of the core is getting developed quite significantly as well. And although these other parts of your body aren't as visible as the spinal erectors are, they're still going to be grown pretty well. So when you do something like a heavy squat or a heavy hinge, you're effectively loading the core. And this will be a lot of what actually makes a difference there. You know, anytime you're stabilizing, anytime you're bracing, that is your core. You know, although I'm kind of somewhat the opposite now, where I opt for machines, I opt for high stability movements to make sure that I'm getting as much bang for my buck. I still manage to get in some hip hinges and some squats, something which is free weight, something where I can challenge my body. But there is some belief that people have where this is all that you need to do. No. We will cover that very, very shortly. But the main takeaway from this is just you need to have one hip hinge, one squat where it's quite difficult, where you know that you're working your spinals, you know you're working your core, you know you're having to brace and stabilize effectively. A quick actionable step almost for this is go to your leg day on Strong, go take a look, see if you've got something that actually covers this. We don't have to have 100% of our hip hinges, 100% of our squats fit this pattern, but make sure there's at least one a week. So, step 4. If compounds build mountains, isolations build the Grand Canyon. That might be a very, very strange analogy I've just thrown out there. But essentially what I'm trying to say is those heavy compounds will build the mountains. It will build huge, huge abs. But if you want bigger abs, if you want more spectacular abs, more impressive abs, yeah, you do have to isolate the abs. And I say isolate, but in reality, it's probably bias. You know, we can never fully take away other muscles from it. But the problem people have when it comes to ab exercises is they actually do movements, which is hip flexion. So hip flexion is bringing your leg up. Picture all the things you're doing right now. Sit-ups, leg raises, and really think about what's going up there. Yeah, your torso is going up, but the way it's doing it is by bringing your legs towards your torso. It might not seem like that at first, but then you think about it a bit further and you realize that's what's going on. And if we look at the actual function of the abs, what is it? It's spinal flexion. So if we take a movement which is bringing the torso to the legs, well, the legs to the torso in reality, and we're not actually doing spinal flexion, how are we effectively using a movement to hit our abs? See, it doesn't really make sense, does it? I mean, I'm sure you remember those times in your youth where you would spam sit-ups and sit-ups and sit-ups, and it would be endless and you could pump out so many and they would never really stop. But if you try to do crunches every now and then, it'd be a bit more difficult. Alongside that, if you try to do a plank, maybe that would be difficult. So you kind of stuck to sit-ups. And the reason this was because you weren't actually training your core. You were just using your hip flexors. And so when we're never really using the abs effectively, how can we expect to grow them with these isolations? I think this is one of the reasons why people stop doing them, as they assume it doesn't work, when in reality, they're not even targeting their abs. So this is actually the section where I originally, in my first video, misinformed people. I told them that you could bias the upper abs and the lower abs depending on how you do a movement. And then I realized that was idiotic. So it doesn't actually matter what exercise you pick here. I again want to reiterate one point, because you might have this nagging thing in your mind going, oh, but Fletcher, heavy compounds do load the abs, and it's not effective, right? Because I'm sure it is effective. It makes a large difference. It's that we can do better. We can do better, okay? So imagine a squat. With a squat, your adductors are being loaded quite heavily. They're used to stabilize mainly in the squat, and and somewhat to hip flexion. But here's the thing. Your adductors, if you go on the adductor machine and you take them to failure, they will blow up in size. You may have had decent ones before from your squats, but the second you get on the machine, there is going to be some progress. There is going to be a difference. And if that can work for another muscle, which is essentially stabilizing, why wouldn't it for abs? You can literally do it and you will see it working for the abs. So, of course, we have to add these spinal flexion exercises, but how do we do it? And here's like an actionable step for this section. I would pick something like a gar hammer. I'd pick something like a cable crunch. You don't even have to do variations. Just pick one thing or two things and focus on spinal flexion. The cable crunch is pretty awesome at doing this because it's really, really easy to set up. And we can maybe do leg raises, we can maybe do knee raises and stuff. But when you're doing this, please focus on bringing the butt up alongside the legs. If we only bring the legs up, we're not actually working the abs. And this is why I kind of prefer doing cable crunches, because it is very easy as a movement to overload and get better at. And, leg raises can be a bit difficult to have the form proper. There's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of other factors at play. So I'm not telling you that you have to do cable crunches and gar hammers. I'm just saying if you had to pick one, you'd probably get the best results from one of those two. And so step 5 is sleep. Now, recently someone was nagging to me all about how, there's not enough stuff about sleep, and sleep is the most important thing, and it's the foundation for everything. And yeah, it is, but I don't think people need to be told that sleep is important. Although, I have a personal story here where when I was younger and I was working out every single day, I literally went to bed at 5 a.m. And my sleep was very, very regular. It was never really too consistent. I wasn't making the sort of gains or progress I should have. And I was getting enough sleep. Like hourly, I was getting enough sleep. So my sleep quantity was enough, but the problem was quality. And even to this day, I will actually admit, sometimes my sleep is a bit irregular still, and I stay up for a little bit extra. But I have a friend who tells me off when I do that, so it doesn't happen as much as it used to. But you may still sit here and be like, oh, so long as I get enough hours, it doesn't really matter too much. Dude, if 2 hours of sleep can be the difference between like 50% of your gains, how much of a difference do you think improving sleep quality actually makes? Some people's 6 hours of sleep is better than your 10 hours of sleep. And that is no joke. Now, the main best way to improve your sleep is by tracking it, unlike most things in life. And I'm sure I'll have a video one day on how to, the ultimate sleep guide or something. But for now, unless there's a call out on one of the corners, I want you to install an app called Sleep Cycle and just start tracking your sleep. Alongside this, you'll be able to look for trends. Maybe reading a bedtime story means your sleep is double as efficient. Maybe regularity really, really affects you, or maybe it doesn't. And maybe alongside that, you can find the best time to wake up and the best time to go to sleep, and we can start moving you towards a place where you're getting better gains. And so for a quick recap, you can go back if you really want, but essentially, step 1 is go check out that video on aggressive deficits. Step 2 is install Cronometer and start tracking weekly what you're consuming. Step 3 is make sure you look a little bit on your leg day and you make sure you have those heavy compounds that's loading the core. For step 4, make sure that you're actually having some spinal flexion work. And for step 5, start tracking your sleep. I'd recommend starting to watch that aggressive deficit video. Alternatively, you can watch this full diet guide if you're not quite ready to cut yet.